Yes, welcome to the No State Project live from the Fortified Compound in Mesa, Arizona, on the Liberty Radio Network, of course, LRN.FM, and also streaming live on my YouTube channel, which is No State Project. So definitely check that out. If you're not subbed, and get subbed, and you won't miss any other broadcast. And if you want to join me on the big show today, I should be all set up there. Yes, if you want to join me on the big broadcast, it is 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. And the passcode there is 2020 with the hashtag, or 2020 with the pound sign. You can also reach me during the show through instant message first, and Skype, Frank Rizzo 3. That's Frank Rizzo with the number 3. We'll get you up on the big broadcast. It is June 2nd, 2018 over here. And I tell you, I didn't have much planned. I figured we'd take a lot of calls today. But one of the things that I figured we could get the show going with, I just as kind of a heads up, although, look, after you speak to these bureaucrats, if taxes, or a prosecutor where you're trying to get the matter resolved in court there, and you've asked them a number of questions, they're going to get gun shy on you, and they're going to start refusing to answer questions. They'll actually say things that they feel like they're under attack because we're being mean, and we're asking questions. And so I had started talking about this on the Wednesday broadcast. Didn't get a chance to finish it, but I've been doing a lot of calls to the Missouri Department of Revenue, and wow, these guys are particularly nasty and rude. No concept whatsoever of right and wrong. To them, it's all legal and illegal. So if you're asking them things, whether they're right or wrong, whether they're fair or not, it is all dictated by what somebody else has told them. No critical thought whatsoever. No independent, free thinking there. Like, when you walk in the door, they leave their spine at the door, and then they go and they do their job. And so after a number of calls with these agents, you tend to get a reputation. And it really sucks when you're trying to actually resolve something and move towards a resolution, and they get even more deliberate in their distractions and in their but just being rude and not acting in good faith. Okay, it's good faith from a bureaucrat. Yeah, that's not really an important thing on their agenda there. So I'm speaking with this Heather, and I had wanted to speak with the supervisor, but the supervisor, Vicki Robinson, is not calling back. And it's just, so I spoke with somebody yesterday, and that you can tell they're absolutely disgusted with speaking with me. And this Heather must have had a heads up. I don't think she remembered who I was before I started asking her the questions. But since Vicki wasn't there, the supervisor, she thought, this Heather thought, well, I'm a tax assistant. Maybe there's something I can do to help you. So, oh. All right, well, it's not every day I have a tax assistant or a tax agent that's actually willing to help. So I figured, what the hell, I'll walk Heather through this. Okay. She initially agreed that they do operate under the presumption that if you're physically in Missouri, that then the laws apply to you. The Constitution and the laws, they apply, and they give them jurisdiction. So I figured, ask a few more questions, so, and this is what we do here. I recommend I'm gonna get to Josh's question after this, talking about trial and talk about a cross-examination. And I believe in handling all the questioning with a tax agent as a cross-examination, as if, so that's why all the questions should be leading questions, which the information I'm trying to elicit is in the question. Okay, so you're leading him. So that's why I ask him, do you operate under this presumption? Oh, yeah, that sounds right to me. They'll usually agree to that. That's the basic presumption that most people subscribe to. Dare I say, religiously so, in that no evidence is necessary. It's a matter of religious type faith. Okay, you just have to take it. Well, this is what I was taught in school. Well, everybody knows. Everybody knows if you're in Arizona that the laws apply. Everybody knows that. You don't have to actually prove it. Not necessarily an issue of faith, but an appeal to popularity. Well, if everyone believes in God, then it must be right. And, almost 1 billion Muslims can't possibly be wrong. I mean, can they? So you see how fallacious that is. So it's the same thing with saying anything here. As far as, well, everybody knows the laws apply. Well, everybody knows the laws apply because if you don't follow the laws, then you go to jail. So everybody knows because you go to jail. So it's the same thing as saying, well, everybody knows that Allah forbids homosexuality. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows it's the law. And where's your evidence these laws apply? How many homosexuals were stoned in Saudi Arabia last year? The fact that they stone you to death is evidence that Allah's laws apply, or at least the laws of the imams. Okay, so you can tell I have nothing. Look, such claims should be treated with ridicule because they're ridiculous. This idea that we have to respect people's ideas. First of all, no. No, it's okay to stone someone because he's a homosexual. No. No. Oh, it's okay to murder somebody because, let's say, a 15-year-old girl was raped because she brought dishonor on her family, so it's okay to murder that. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and say no to that. So I'm asking these questions of Heather, and so I run into difficulty right off the bat because I don't know exactly what she does. What I want to know for sure before I start asking her more questions. So I said, well, part of your job, Heather, as a tax assistant is to apply state laws to people in Missouri. She didn't want to answer the question directly. Well, there's this and there's that. Heather, yes or no, do you apply Missouri state statutes to people in Missouri as a regular part of your job as a tax agent? She won't answer the question directly. I'm thinking, oh, I get it. You've been talking with Vicky and you've been talking with Daryl and you talk with Jane. You talk with these people, and because they can't support their claim, they don't like that I won't just accept that everybody knows, or I just won't accept it on religious faith, or that's just how it works. Because I don't accept that kind of trash and I actually question them, they don't like it. So they probably said, they probably heard of me. Just like with Gary Murphy with the Internal Revenue Service up there in Wyoming. And I do have this on the website. And if an internal memo to the Wyoming office there, I guess it was in Casper, not to take any calls from me, because there are over 24 very embarrassing calls, embarrassing to the agency on my website, markstevens.net. So that's right. Imagine that, getting resistance when you're asking them, do you apply the law to people as a part of your job? Wow. Okay. All right. Well, we'll be back with your calls and more here on the No State Project and on my YouTube stream and also LRN.FM. So don't go anywhere. We will be back in just a moment. Don't go away. Yes, welcome back to the No State Project here on the Liberty Radio Network, LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network, streaming live from my fortified compound here in Mesa, Arizona on my YouTube channel, No State Project. And I'll get back to Heather in just a moment. The number is 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399, with the passcode is 2020 with the pound sign. Somebody's asking if... hey, Mark, can I use what you teach in Denmark? And we've had, as long as the operating presumption is that if you're physically in Denmark, then their laws apply. Then I see no reason why we've had success in outside the U.S. I would imagine in China they just don't give a damn. There, see, unlike the United States, they're not putting the public relations isn't quite as as fallacious. I mean, right there. I mean, they all look. Look, the law. Look, our laws don't apply here in China. They apply. You just do what we say, or we will kill you. Here, they try to cover up, with propaganda. They try to do a little bit better of a job than in China. Here, the laws don't apply. It's only because they're willing to, put you in jail or kill you in the process. That is their jurisdiction. The jurisdiction is not based on the law. It is not based on consent or anything like that. And I'm not saying it is based on consent. People like to lie about me. I've never won. I don't say that. I don't go into court and say that I don't consent to this, therefore there's no jurisdiction. And anybody putting that out is just they're lying. And I've got what I do point out is that the reason why their claim that the laws do apply is fallacious and false is because they are just men and women forcing us to pay them. There's just no evidence to actually prove that. So here in the United States, they try to, even though it was by conquest, which is immoral from top to bottom, it's just wrong. They try to cover that up and say, oh, well, the U.S. is different. We're different. It's by consent. No, you can't have it both ways. You can't say that the law says this and is the final thing, and then turn around and say, well, jurisdiction is just power. It's used by conquest. That's not what the laws say. There's a contradiction there, and that's what we do here on the show, is bring out contradictions. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to do it in Denmark. Depends on how much they cling to the notion that they are there to provide things like due process and fairness. So if you're entitled to a fair trial, yeah, you can use the Socratic method to bring out these contradictions, that it is not fair, regardless of what their laws say. It's not fair. Laws are known to be grossly unfair. Again, look at the Middle East. You have children getting married. You have it's legal to kill a homosexual for no other reason than they're homosexual. Women have to be covered from head to foot. That's the law. So as I mentioned before, you can't look to political laws for what is right and what is wrong. So in Denmark, if they are going by certain principles of fairness, you may be able to bring that out. Well, you should always be able to bring out how unfair it is. Whether they're going to do the right thing and still toss it out, that remains to be seen. But we have had success in Europe and of course Australia and New Zealand, and we've had success thanks to Eyal of No State Project Israel. He and some friends have had success in Israel. So so before I get to any, I want to finish this thing about Heather, because this is where I ran. I wasn't able to. I wasn't able to finish this the other day. So what I was saying was that you have tax agents that after they know what you're doing. So this is the thing. If it was so easy to prove that the laws apply, why would I have to come on the show and report? And I've done this before. They actually don't want to admit that during the course of their jobs, they apply the laws to people. And I believe that the reason why they won't even admit that part of their job is applying the laws to people is because they know they have no evidence to support that. And if they're not honest enough to admit that, then at least they know that if they're questioned on this to actually prove their assertion, they won't be able to do that. Now, they could just say, well, we don't. Yes, and the IRS. Yeah, I know. I know. Robert Jones, Michael Marconi, San Francisco. I know. Some of you guys are so callous and are so dishonest. You'll say things like, we don't need evidence. I get that. I get it. That's why I can confidently report that you're a criminal. So eventually, and I just couldn't believe. I said, Heather, are you actually telling me that you don't know if you apply Missouri state taxing statutes to people in Missouri as a part of your job as a Missouri state tax agent? She realized, well, I either have to hang up on this idiot or I have to answer the question, well, yes, of course I do. Again, once they say that they do apply the tax code to other people, they're making determinations that the laws apply to them. And it doesn't help them out at this stage of the game. And it shouldn't help them out in court, but it certainly doesn't help them here. All they can do here is discredit themselves further by not answering the damn question. So what if someone says, well, Mark, they're not there to answer your questions? What do you say to that? I said, well, those acting in good faith are, if they're going to be making a claim and they want to resolve the dispute, will answer the question. They will support their claim. Because again, good faith and fairness dictates. If you're making a claim against somebody, you should be able to prove it's true. And just because I use the word prove, or you or I or someone, just because you use the word prove doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're invoking the godlike cult of lawyers that only judges can say whether the law has been proven to apply. No, if you're making a claim, you have to prove it. Now, okay, so so this is something you have to expect with these people. If they were acting in good faith, they would answer the question, because you're trying to resolve this in good faith. You're trying to come to a resolution. If you've got the evidence, I'm more than happy to cut you a check. Just more than happy to. But this idea that you put these bureaucrats up on a pedestal, and again, this is just something that they just make up. They just make up as an excuse to cover up their lack of evidence. So they're apologists, they just make it up. Well, we don't have to answer your questions. Well, fairness and due process and dictates, and good faith dictates that, yeah, if you've got a claim, put your evidence on the table so that we can come to a resolution. But to sit there like a 5-year-old and say, I don't have to, come on. And this is what you gotta look at it that way. I don't have to prove. I don't have to answer your questions. Yeah, well, those who are above the age of 7 realize that that's what good faith demands. We'll be back with the No State Project here on LRN.FM. Don't go away. Yes, welcome back to the No State Project. And you know, guys, when I have callers, yeah, it's easier to just blow through the commercials. But for those who aren't aware, I'm actually doing a radio broadcast right now. So the LRN stream, which I thought you could hear. I actually have done shows where you could hear the LRN stream, but apparently, I don't know. There's something I got to work out there, but it's not a big deal. But yeah, so I get that it might be boring to just see a guy sitting here. Maybe I'll go and I'll play the bumper music for the duration of the breaks when LRN takes the breaks. But you can join me, and I can, so when we start getting callers, I will blow through the commercial breaks like I've done before. Because again, the editing, if I mute out the breaks, it takes about a minute to edit. If I don't mute out the breaks, then it could take almost an hour to 2 hours to edit the podcast. So kind of give me some slack here. Although, yeah, I know I'm it's on YouTube, so you're not really going to get any slack. All the nastiness comes out typically on the YouTube comments. So anyway, what I was talking about before the break is something that's a very common thing that we get into. It's avoiding questions where it's going to make you look bad, and I get that. I understand. I mean, that's why when I make statements on the air, I make sure that if I call someone like Stephen Myrie, or Cheryl Hardy, if I call them criminals, I damn well better have my facts straight to support the claim. I am not one of these government types or an apologist that believes that I could just say and then have a bunch of people, brilliant. He doesn't need evidence. Brilliant. Mark, you don't know, you guys, Mark's critics, you don't understand. No evidence is necessary. Mark is like the government. He's like lawyers. He doesn't need evidence. Doesn't need evidence. Somebody, Cheryl Hardy is a criminal. That is a fact, and we have the evidence to support that. So what you get when you're dealing with tax agents and you're dealing with people who think that the government is a legitimate organization and that the courts are actually fair, you'll get these things. You'll get these statements from them where they'll say, "Government employee, they're not like you, Mark. They are honorable. They get to make claims against you and everybody else, and they don't need any evidence." This is why I do it. I don't accept that. And it's not enough to just say, well, it's the law. You're making assumptions just like this tax agent. You're making determinations. You're making claims against people that affect them. And to turn around and say that they don't have to answer questions, so they don't have to have any proof, you're making the point that it's unfair. And it doesn't change how unfair it is to say it's the law. One, there's not a shred of evidence proving the law applies. It doesn't help your case and you say laws are somehow different, that doesn't require evidence. All you're doing is letting people know what a criminal you are. To turn around and say that you can write things down, make up rules, just literally make rules up and say that they apply to everybody and that you don't need any evidence because you created a rule that says you don't need evidence. No. And for anyone to say that that's legitimate, for anyone to say that that's fair and that is right and moral, to turn around, no. Well, actually, I don't know if anyone really would say something so stupid. I think they would say it's legal. But saying whether something's legal, again, doesn't say anything about whether it's fair and whether it's moral and whether it's something that we should follow. So again, slavery was once legal. So that's what political laws get you. And to answer the question, banks get bailed out, destroy the economy and they get bailed out. And yet the IRS goes after you with a ferocity that, like a caged animal. I mean, why do they do that? Well, because the IRS and all taxing agencies have long worked for the banks and the super wealthy. Government has long been a tool of the rich. So you look at the American Revolution. It was a Western expansion that George didn't want. It was just part of it, of course. But yeah, they wanted their Western expansion, and they were rich. Yeah, okay. Actually, getting rid of the British authorities, for example, I know I keep going back to Massachusetts, not necessarily spearheaded by the rich. That was you know, like a common man did that. The Revolution and how they started taking over the taxing districts, and how they started burning and looting and taking farms from pacifists. So because you either supported the revolution, or you lost all your stuff, or you were killed in the process. So yeah, by the rich, for the rich. So what I guess that's enough on Heather. I'll talk more about that, and we'll talk answer Josh's questions regarding cross-examination, how we do things at trial. So we got a new caller over here. Got area code 907. You're live on the No State Project. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Greetings, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing well. What's your name? Where you calling from?
I am so-called Alaska.
You're calling from Alaska?
Well, on it, yeah, allegedly.
You sound like you're from Long Island.
Is it coming through pretty clear, Mark?
Yeah, well, I didn't get your name, though.
Cool. I am.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Is that a religious significance, or?
Well, if I knew what the word religious meant, which I'm led to believe, maybe I got an idea, but I don't like to get put in those boxes personally. So.
I'm just thinking of the quote. That's all.
Sure. Long time listener, first time caller, as it said. So, but I've been listening, and could I maybe add something to it, please?
You could do what?
Could I add something to what you were just saying, please?
Of course.
Could it be that everybody's got to own shit and own God's stuff to the point where it becomes, you know, a tug of war in the so-called sandbox, and next thing you know, somebody's got to regulate it and start charging for taxes?
You think that's how it started, or why it should be? Do you think? Well, I'll ask you that first. Do you think that's how any government has actually started?
Well, the ideology behind that, if you really are asking me, I'll be honest and tell you what I believe. I believe it's started with dominion. I believe, you know, you got your so-called human beings already defined per the legal dictionaries. I'm led to believe as monster, beast. If one's ignorant of the law, could it be they die like a beast?
Well, you know, that definition's been bandied around, and it's not like you can use one definition for everything and say that definition applies. But it also, if you, I would imagine if you looked up that case, it gives a little more explanation. And I think the operative word there is includes, and in some camps, especially those from the 90s, the Patriots like to think that includes only, and that's not. The word of art includes does not exclude something that would normally be there. It's not restrictive. It's so the idea that it just applies to monsters, I doubt anybody would be going into court and would be able to prove that a cop, a prosecutor, a tax agent was using human being in to mean a monster. Unless maybe if I was referring to a judge as a human being, or Cheryl Hardy, then I would probably say it's the restrictive monster. Oh. So what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna mute up the feed. And so for those listening on LRN.FM, we'll be back in just a few moments. So definitely calling at 218-632-9399 with the passcode 2020. For those on YouTube, we're gonna get some extra content. We're gonna blow right through that. So you believe that? I have to say that the evidence is absolutely staggering. It's overwhelming that every government has been an act of conquest of the military types over the rest of society.
Sure.
So there's no examples of where people in a given area just decided, hey, yeah, we all agree pretty much that we're going to live in society here, and yeah, you got to have services such as you got to have water, you got to have sanitation, we want protection, we want problem resolution, protection, and instead of just charging for that service, even if we socialize that, I don't mean socialism, but we socialize the cost because we have certain things held in common. I don't think we should do that. I think what we should do is actually have a ruling class order us, and force us to pay and put us in prison and take all our stuff just in case we don't pay for the water bill.
That's a beautiful thought. Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Could it be those that cannot govern themselves from within need governed from without? Could it be some people need that?
Some people do.
Could be a lot of people choose that.
Well, yes. Do you give those particular types of people a platform to rule others and to give them immunity and give them a platform where they can, instead of just doing damage on an individual level, they're actually able to do it on a societal level? You're actually talking about people and putting them in, because that's what the ruling class is doing to us. They're the type of people who can't govern themselves. They won't control their actions. They won't comply with the basic moral code of do no harm. So,
well, then in that case, would it be wise to have a platform for those so-called people? I mean,
you don't have to convince me it's not wise to have a platform. No, the platform is having a ruling class so that they can rise through the ranks and become a part of the ruling class. I think having a government, what we call government, having that in place is giving sociopaths and those who cannot follow the rules, it's giving them a platform and immunity so that they can really damage people, where in a voluntary society without a government platform, they wouldn't be able to damage nearly as many people. Unless, of course, they were the head of a large company like GM. Then they could do untold. They could do incredible amounts of damage to people.
Sure. And if what you're doing works, I've always agreed that that's so-called path, if there's such a thing, that some should take or listen to. But on the flip side of the coin, where I'm standing, could it be that the people that walk in the so-called court are dishonorable and right out the gate, and the judges get the blunt of it because people are maybe having issues with communication, with being honorable, with, seems to me, I've sat in there, I've watched the proceedings, and it seems to me 98% of them got what they're asking for.
Well, there are a lot of bad people in society. Do we give them a platform to do more, or do we, or do we restructure, or do we actually continue to tolerate and say that the only way to do this and available to us is to structure society in a way that you have a ruling class? I don't believe. I think we can have the same services. Look, it comes down to the only real big disagreement I have when you apply do no harm to everybody is the manner in which the government services are paid. I think if we kept the services but took away the restraint used and took away the violence, what do you call that? The force don't use the force continuum for payment and support. I think if you got rid of that, you're still, I think we'd have a lot better society, would function much more honorably, much more ethically, of course, and certainly more morally consistent. We'd still have people who are doing bad things. They're just not going to have the same platform. And I think people who actually violate the do no harm rule will be held to a lot more account.
Sure. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
Okay. As if I just didn't, right? So in all the thousands of years to establish the so-called legal system or the society or the judicial process or what have you, I think you know what I mean. I hope anyways. Do you think that it was built on a good foundation and it was heading somewhere to help society, or it was always bad, or it got lost somewhere along the way? I mean, because that's the
question. I look at the American one as an example, and how can you, even if you excuse, let's just say, all right, well, they took over the taxing districts because they had to pay for the war. We'll just say that was actually that they had no nefarious goals there. We'll give them a pass on that. What possible justification do you have for the Western expansion and the destruction of so many Indian villages during 1776 and 1783? And even if you give them and you say, well, let's look and give them a pass on that. How in the world could you possibly give these people a pass for looking at human beings, men, women, and children, and viewing them as property? There's no pass on that. So even if we excuse the war of expansion and we excuse the taxing, there's no possible justification. I don't give a damn about tradition. There were a lot of people who didn't believe in slavery. A lot of people, even 2,000 years ago in Rome, a lot of people disagree with slavery. So you can't look past the example, the blight of slavery. The fact that these people looked at men, women, and children as property, inexcusable. So I can't see that, at least the Americans, that there was any good faith intentions for the most part. I can't accept. The evidence just doesn't bear it out.
It would be your summation, if you will, the summation that it was not built on a good foundation.
I don't believe it was. I don't believe that. I think like Rome and Greece, people can look at, look how safe the Spartan government, city state, look how safe they kept the Spartans. Really? That may have been true for, however, they did on the foundation of slavery. The entire Greek culture was based on, that part of Greece, the golden era and whatnot, was all based, the society was propped up on a foundation of slavery and warfare.
With all due respect, Mark, were you there though? I mean, how do we know exactly what's being told, that there's truth to, that's the whole truth?
That Greece and Rome were built on a foundation of slavery? Okay, I guess if you go by the historical records, you have things that were written, you have other evidence of that, you have paintings, and it was part of their law. It was actually written in the laws. So you have a written maybe not so much with the Greeks. I don't know how much of their laws were actually written, but the Romans it's in their laws. So you would have to, so it's not only in the laws and in the paintings, and historians have written about it. And then you also have where people that they've conquered have written about it.
Sure.
I think I think the evidence is pretty strong. I mean, it's not like we're going based on no evidence. So I would say based on historical evidence available to us, that we could be pretty certain that Rome was built on slavery, and that they did practice slavery.
Oh, I don't believe there's any question whether it actually existed or not, but the thought occurred that what about what we weren't told? What about those that the laws didn't apply to? Those that were not so-called Roman citizens? What about those stories and those things that we're not told about?
Such as?
Well, how do you feel about the so-called Encyclopedia Britannica definition of legal? 73 or something. I'd have to go and pull it up, but the undoing of God's law. And do you see a difference between legal and law? Could it be some follow law and some go with the legal system?
Well, I make a distinction between political laws and religious laws, and I make no distinction.
About natural laws that are absolute. I can't say if that's an absolute or not, but laws that don't need to be written, that just are.
Well, if you're talking about observable phenomena of nature and whatnot, then we say that do no harm is a good principle, because in our own self-preservation, we know that there's an objective proof to violating the do no harm. It's actually in the phrase because it causes harm.
Could it be though that what you're saying is what the foundation was built on, was for a society, say, went over and the guy took from the neighbor without asking his tools and then never returned them and ruined them, right? And then the other neighbor come over and hit him over the head or something. Could it be a so-called society or group of men witnessed that and said, you know, that just doesn't work. That's not going to work. We need to put something in place and back this guy up and say, listen, if you're going to go hit someone over the head and crack their head open, we need to let you know that that's not going to fly. And if you don't like that, then move out in the mountains where there's nobody to, you know, have an idea of that, and whether that's a right or a wrong. But
well,
it seems to me it could be the very foundation it was built on.
Well, I believe that they adopted that because if you go back enough, it was always that the parens patriae, that the emperor in Rome was the father of the country and his duty was to protect his family. I believe they took what society had already created and then imposed themselves on there and then pretended that they were the father of the country. They still even say that about the Queen. I believe they took that as a way to legitimize themselves, because if you look at all right, let's say like the Declaration of Independence, that to secure these rights of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, or life, liberty, and property, that to secure those rights, governments are instituted among men from the consent of the governed. If you look at if you take that's the law, that's the organic law. And is that consistent with what happened? And a lot of people will say, some, they're absolutely correct. It was an act of conquest. So does the act of conquest, does that line up with consent? No, I believe they just used the protection of life, liberty, and property as window dressing to convince people not to revolt, to convince people. Because if jurisdiction really is nothing to do with law, I mean, it's got nothing to do with the law. Jurisdiction is an act of power. Then an equal or greater act of power is also jurisdiction. So now you've got two competing jurisdictions. So if a cop is attempting to pull somebody over and somebody pulls a gun and is exhibiting equal force, his jurisdiction is now equal to the jurisdiction of the cop. And so basic principles of logic and morality dictate it would be morally justified to use force like that, if necessary, to stop the cop from acting on a presumption of jurisdiction, wouldn't it?
Well, you know what the World Court has to say about that? Possibly that is an act of war.
Which one is the act of war?
Imposing one's so-called jurisdiction or laws to another's jurisdiction or laws. It's an act of war.
That's why it's probably something that gave birth to the sovereign citizen kind of, or the freeman type movement. I
don't know what that is or what gave birth to it. I just recall reading in the Law of Nations that it's an act of war for one nation, which is its own so-called sovereignty and jurisdiction, to impose its laws on another nation.
Right, but
they're
not looking at it on an individual level. I don't think they're looking at a traffic stop as an act of war. Okay.
Well, I was just referring to you, like you're saying, if one jurisdiction's here and then somebody has another one and there's that conflict. But I couldn't disagree with you, and I wanted to touch, as you get further into it, what you were talking about with the citizenship and that. Black's third citizen is defined as one who submits to the dominion of government. So there you have it.
Well, there are obviously contradictions there. You have one where jurisdiction is by consent, and then the other, is that it's by conquest, or you have to submit. So it depends on who you're talking to. I believe that so if you look at from what's supposed to be legal, the jurisdiction is supposed to be power as exercised pursuant to the Constitution. Obviously, there's no evidence to show the Constitution applies, so it really just goes back to it's an act of aggression.
Sure. If I come to your house, so-called house that you are at, and I come in or knock on the door, you say, come on in. And you say, in this house, I'd like you to remove your shoes. I'm going to, out of kindness and out of your jurisdiction, I'm going to remove those shoes. Because I believe it's the good thing to do. I could leave and go do something else, or I could argue with you about your jurisdiction in your home, and I feel like that would be dishonorable. And I don't know about legal definition and people's concepts of what it is, but to me it seems that jurisdiction is where you are that somebody is claiming is theirs and that they have rules on it.
But what you're getting into now is more or less property rights and respect for the property rights. And this is something.
If I submit myself to your rules in your house, wouldn't I be under your jurisdiction?
I don't like. Well, jurisdiction is a political word. It's a jurisdiction has to do with with the power of a government or a government agency to act. Wouldn't want to have such a broad
terms that the common folk might be able to grasp the idea of what that is. Because allegedly jurisdiction only applies on land owned and occupied by.
That's not entirely true. Jurisdiction is really against a relationship. And that's why taxing agencies like the Franchise Tax Board don't give a damn about where you are physically located. They only care if you're getting money from California. And then even
if, sorry to interrupt you, Mark, but even if I hold a document that where I stand has been seceded from the United States and they give up all judicial authority, really?
Well, the thing is with the United States government doesn't claim an exclusive territorial jurisdiction. Their jurisdiction, Cook v. Tate, I read on the show not too long ago, has to do with a relationship that when they're talking about their jurisdiction and the power to tax, it's based on the presumption of a relationship that you have to the government, so that no matter where you're physically located, even if you're on the damn moon, the United States government will still falsely claim that they have jurisdiction over you.
That's interesting. I've actually seen a few so-called cases play out in court where it was quite the opposite, but I don't doubt that is something that folks do run into. I was under the impression that these government buildings, if you look up the owner and that, it's always under the United States of America Corporation, right?
For which buildings?
These government buildings, right? So are claimed and owned by the corporation, and the policy enforcers are hired to enforce United States laws on United States territory. That's why when somebody says, just because I am in the state of Texas, do your laws apply? I don't see any evidence that I'm in any state.
Sure. It shouldn't even be phrased that way. We should always phrase as physically in Texas and not use their weasel words or their words of art.
Right. Well, if the state of Texas is a corporation that only exists in a filing cabinet on a piece of paper, how can you ever be in that? Seems to me it's a silly question to ask. No offense, brother, but it seems like a silly question.
What seems like a silly question?
To ask somebody, if I'm simply standing somewhere, if the state of somewhere, if that makes me apply in that, if that your rules apply to me, simply because I'm standing in the state of. But you would have to first possibly believe that you could be standing in the state of.
Well, no, I don't. I would, again, I wouldn't ask that question, and the reason why I asked the question is to get to start with a point of agreement, so I know exactly what their claim is, so now I can start taking it apart.
Okay.
So that's why I start with.
I probably misunderstood something along the way, or misinterpreted something.
Not a problem. We're all guilty of that. But I always start from a point of agreement, and this goes to like when you're doing a cross-examination also. So the point of agreement is their claim that if you're physically in Texas or you're physically in Alaska, that their laws apply, and give them jurisdiction over you. And so starting from there, knowing what it is, then we can start, dissecting and pulling it apart. Like, well, why do you believe that that's true?
Sure, but it's never the dirt. From what I've ever seen, it's never the dirt.
Oh, no, they're
the corporation. That's the fictitious entity. Obviously, it has to be legal to be entered into the court, right?
They believe that it exists. So, and we just said it. Well, hold on one second. We're coming back from the break.
Okay.
I know. So, and I do appreciate everyone tuning in. We actually have a new record now for the live stream of people tuning in live. I don't know if there's something I really always want to point out, but we just broke the previous record. So, now you're going to start signing off because I said that? Oh, come on, guys. But we're talking with I Am from Alaska here on the big broadcast, and the LRN.FM stream should be coming back live here with the second of 3 hours of Anarchy Radio right here on the Liberty Radio Network, live from the Fortified Compound. It's June 2nd, 2018. And anarchy, meaning no rulers. And if you believe that a ruling class is necessary, make a moral argument for that. Make a moral claim, a moral argument for why it would be moral to force strangers to give money or put them in prison. But talking with I Am in Alaska, and if you want to join me here on the big broadcast, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. And so what we're talking about is, them claiming jurisdiction. I don't think that when they say to us, and I've known, at least from my experience, when they say state of Texas, they're not thinking political. In their mind, they're thinking Austin, or they're thinking, physical location. So what I do is I always ask the question in lay terms so that we know exactly what they're talking about. So there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Because you can ask
an entity, without a created entity, it seems it would be very difficult to try to bring that forward.
Well, the entity comes into play when the prosecutor is standing there in court. He's not claiming to represent the ground. He's claiming to represent the body politic and the body corporate.
Sure.
And so if you want to address, hey, I'm all for that if you've got the time. I know there's no way in the world that they can produce every time I have done that, and in court, it used to be a big thing about asking if the prosecutor had evidence to prove that he represented anybody other than himself. Just some proof. In every other case, if a lawyer comes in and claims that he's representing a corporation, he has to prove it. And you don't do that by saying, I'm a member of the bar, sir. I passed the bar. No, bar card does not prove you have a client. And just saying who the client is, allegedly, is not evidence that they have a client. And so this goes back. And so I believe it's Rule 9 in the Civil Rules of Procedure, where they would have to prove that they actually had a client. And I used to talk about this all the time, that they do take it pretty serious, because if you and I go in and claim to represent a corporation, they raise holy hell for that. But they let lawyers do that all the time. And so what evidence would they have to prove that they represent somebody other than themselves? They have to prove they have a client, prove the state of Texas as a body corporate and body politic actually exists. And what evidence would be necessary to do that?
Sure. Sure.
I don't think you can, which is why in every instance I've put a prosecutor on the spot to prove that he had a client. In not one instance could they do that. I know. They don't have to prove that. I get it. I know. The rules don't apply to lawyers in most instances like that.
Can
But
I back the little Charlie train up a little bit, Mark? Back to what you said right at the break there about the governing class.
The ruling class, yes.
The governing ruling. You asked if anybody had a point about that. I don't want to ruffle your feathers, brother, but I'm led to believe it's very important to have a ruling class, or governing ruling class.
A ruling class.
I believe we discussed it a little bit earlier in the call, because some folks just are, I'm led to believe, are incapable of being kind and courteous and all that good hippy dippy stuff, man. And somebody needs to freaking deal with it.
Well, I already addressed. I'm also
led to believe these judges are not that bad, and that if you treat them right, they'll be honorable and treat you right.
Yeah, that's true in a lot of cases. That's very true. You could also say the same thing about the henchmen for the Al Capone's guys. Hey, look, just look, do what you're told. Buy the beer from Al only, and nothing will. But I already discussed too what we can do.
Are you comparing them to Al Capone's guys? I mean, that seems like a pretty far fetched, brother. I mean, Al Capone's men who are out, to do that versus a judge who might be a little confused about how to maybe properly do their job. Maybe things have been lost in translation for that particular individual, if you will, for lack of a better term, and maybe need guided and helped.
Well,
they're a little off base. I mean, they're dealing with a lot of fucking claimants, man.
Well, I get that.
What are they supposed to do?
Well, I'll explain again why I compare them to the Yakuza or to Al Capone's guys. Because the way they are paid and supported is exactly the same. Okay. They are forcing strangers to give them money under the guise of protection.
Led to believe it's voluntary.
They're led to believe it's voluntary, but it's not. And so payment of taxes is not voluntary.
Well, if you don't own anything, how do you owe a tax for anything? Could it be claiming and running around owning everything in God's green earth that doesn't belong to anybody other than maybe use, enjoyment, and control?
Well,
you want to own shit? You want to take it all? Pay the bill. Pay the tax.
But that doesn't make taxes any less compulsory. You can say, someone did this years ago when they were ranting about when I disagreed with Ron Paul, and he's saying that Ron Paul was in it, that not, excise taxes aren't compulsory, because after all, you don't have to do X, Y, Z. But that doesn't make it any less compulsory. It's still compulsory.
If everything's an obligation of the United States, right?
But tax,
why not let it be an obligation of the United States instead of claiming that it's yours and now it becomes your obligation?
Well, but that doesn't make it any less compulsory. There is I just mentioned it. There is a force.
Mark, what does that mean? I apologize, man. Compulsory, is that like reaction or?
That means, in simple terms, do this or get punished. Do this or I will hurt you. Okay. You have no choice. You either do this or we're going to force you or else. Okay. So I got some other calls I got to get to, though, but I certainly don't believe that there's any evidence whatsoever to even begin to suggest that taxation is voluntary.
Well, maybe on a side note, we could talk about it, because I believe I have some information that suggests otherwise, but I really appreciate you taking the call and chit-chatting. It's really a pleasure speaking with you, Mark.
I appreciate the call. I am. Please call again. He's been on the show. He's been on the show before. Maybe do we have to talk about Les Pauls or veganism?
No, I don't want to talk about veganism.
Oh, Tom. Well, this is Tom from the Big D, and I actually don't mean any disrespect when I say that. That's actually your phrase for it, isn't it?
It's a what?
The Big D. I was just mentioning. I'm not using that in a pejorative sense.
No, I don't care. Come on, you know me. I got pretty thick skin.
Okay. Okay.
I live in Detroit, man. Come on. Anyway, I just wanted to just touch on a real quick, quick idea.
Okay.
Or something here. All right, Joe and Bao. You're familiar with obviously Joe and perhaps Bao by now.
Of course, Bao's been on the show.
Okay. And you know, and again, I'm not really a big fan of Joe, but that's not the point. You know, I support anyone that is fighting for our liberties, you know, however they want to do it. But I see what they're doing by poking the beehive down there as very dangerous and useless. They're swatting at the branches, risking being imprisoned for a longer stay than 30 days on contempt or something. I mean, I don't see you doing stuff like that. I don't see Larkin Rose doing things like that.
Well, what are they? And before before you answer what they're actually doing, just know that we shouldn't be so narrow focused on getting to the tactics of getting to a voluntary society. You know, everyone has their thing, and there are things that they're good at, and there's only so much of your time you can split up. So one man's activism is not necessarily every man's activism. So. But what are they actually doing to poke the beehive, so to speak?
Well, I fully agree with what you just said. Everybody has to go about it their own way, and I respect that. But from what I'm watching, these videos that they keep posting and these live streams, they're going into this, you know, court in this Texas town they're in, and just constantly poking. I don't know. I don't see any point in it. One of them, Joe's in a courtroom. It's where Bao. The guy, Freeman guy with the red beard, got arrested. And they're just, you know, Joe's in there trying to, in the courtroom, before the judge gets into the courtroom, he's trying to educate the people in the court. And you can tell that they start throwing barbs at him, actually. They start to, you know, he's not getting anywhere like that. And if he thinks that those people are going to go home and say, hey, you know, there was this guy in there, and he said this and that, and boy, well, I'm seeing the real corrupt government. No, they're going home and going, man, well, there was this jerk in court, and and he's risking going to jail. It just seems stupid to me.
Well, okay, I haven't seen a lot of it. Okay, I'll say this: they get an awful lot of views with not that many subs. So, maybe their audience are not the individuals in court. It's people that are watching at home or on their phones. But what is it that they're saying that is getting, is not getting the message across? I mean, what are they actually saying?
Well, again, I don't want to say anything specific, but I find that asking questions, Larkin Rose has a video out called something about bears. Basically, when we try to explain some of this stuff, I know when I encounter people and I try to have discussions with them that are, brainwashed statists still, or maybe they don't even realize they're statists. They've been through the indoctrination camps called school. It is so hard to get them to even think about things. When you start telling them things, they shut right down. It's, that's kind of one of the questions I wanted to ask you is, what do you think the best way of discussing these ideas with people and having them not shut down right away?
Well, like I've already mentioned on the show, look, I think it's absolutely essential we start with a point of agreement. You have to meet people at their map of the world. I mean, that's, that's going way back. I mean, from, 20 years ago, with my NLP background, I know it's my mention of NLP and the G in the background is going to make people crazy. It's going to trigger a couple people, but you have to get agreement. And I agree. I think it's much better to ask questions once we get a point of agreement, to then ask questions. I would still ask leading questions to bring people to question what they're actually doing. So you could look, I think it's really effective in my experience to ask first, get the agreement. If I was to force strangers to give me, if I was to do things like the government and I force strangers to give me money, wouldn't you consider me a criminal? And unless I'm talking to a government agent or apologist, I always get an answer to that question, right? I mean, I'm sure you have.
Yeah, that's a very good lead-in. I like that. I'm going to try to ingrain that in my brain. That's really good. Yep, you get an agreement first, and then break it down from there. You just explain that to the bad guy there. So, yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So and now,
Joe and Bao, when they're in that courtroom and they're pushing those buttons and poking that beehive like that, they're not asking questions because it's not the right forum to have those people sitting there waiting their turn, to go up in front of the judge and get fleeced. It's not that you can't ask them questions. And I don't know, I just see them as poking the beehive, and they're going to end up in a cage, and they don't need to be. And we need them to be out of the cage. They're doing well. They're helping. They're trying to anyway.
I certainly wouldn't. I haven't seen it, so I'm going to just go based on what you're saying. So I do think it would. And I've gone to court and I've spoken to people also, giving them some very good, common sense, effective, tips on how to help themselves in court. And one, so I think it's better to look at it. These are some of the things that we've done to expose that it's unfair, to object and ask this, and say, now I know this may be a lot to take in. I don't want to, but just, you'll see the moment you ask one or two questions like this, you're going to see very quickly that how unfair the situation really is that you're in. And I've seen that that's been effective. And I'll put this out too. It's great to go to court. I think it's even better as an activist to teach people. And I think we can reach people better because they're not under the gun and in an extremely stressful situation, is to do that same thing at a city council meeting. Because the people in the audience there are not in a high stress situation as they are in court. So it could be some of the people in court are not going to be as open to the message because they're already so stressed out. And it could be where they're getting confused by what is good information, good effective tips and strategy. They're just not in the most beneficial situation to receive that. I'm not saying don't do it. I would say keep that in mind if people are throwing, like you said, throwing barbs. And maybe Joe and Bao. Oh, Joe is already. Well, Joe doesn't just do it. I'm pretty certain Joe has gone to the county commissioners or the city council. I know we've seen at least one of the videos where he's done that. The only thing I would say when we go do something like that, Tom, is, and I'm a little guilty of this myself, is don't monologue when you get there.
Right.
Just go straight to the question. If I did things in the same manner as you guys and forced strangers to give me money, would you consider me a criminal? And then look at the reaction you get from people. Because, like, I can't believe you just said that.
Right. That's a great lead-in. And I just want to say that that video from Larkin is called Reasoning with Bears. And it's really good, and it discusses this, how not to have people instantly put up that wall. You have to, like you said, try to get an agreement first, start from there. So anyway, enough of your time, sir. There's other people that want to call you. Thank you.
Wait, before you go, did you say bears?
Yeah, he says reasoning with bears, as in wild bears. And there's a reason for it. If you watch the video, it's quite explained, but it's really good. It's not that long of a video, and it really is a good example of what we run into and maybe how to get around it, because as soon as you start, I know my own experiences, people that I work with, and I try to talk to them about this stuff, and you can see instantly a wall goes up, and we don't know what we're talking about, and there's no way that we could ever exist without government. It'd be chaos and blah blah blah. So anyway, and like Larkin says in that video, we don't change people's minds. They have to change their minds themselves. So we have to ask the right questions.
Yeah, and I got just this to say about bears. Bears eat beets, okay? And bears beets Battlestar Galactica. So there you go.
All right, Mike, you have a good day.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Tom. I couldn't resist that. I had to drop that on everybody, but I do appreciate that. Tom from the Big D up in Detroit, where probably more vacant homes than homeless people. That's not saying there's not a huge homeless problem. We get to another caller there. New caller from area code 716. You're live on the No State Project. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Hi, Mark. Shane from upstate New York.
Shane from New York.
How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
Well, I'm on the west part of the state. That accent will be more on the east part of the state. But I'm over by Buffalo, Rochester area. Are you familiar with that area?
Hey, tough guy. I was born in Cheektowaga.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yep, born in Cheektowaga.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah,
So you're familiar. You're familiar with the Galleria Mall then?
No, my parents mercifully moved me out to Long Island when I was about 2. So no.
Well, I just have a quick question here. I won't keep you too long, but I just wanted to let you know I had a traffic case from like 3 years ago, and I got pulled over. I refused to give my ID, and about 4 weeks later, they issued tickets on me, and they let me go. But 4 weeks later, after the incident, they issued tickets for obstruction of justice, interfering with a police officer, and they gave me a seatbelt ticket. And I thought that was kind of strange. And then I had to turn myself in. And ultimately, about a year later, I pleaded guilty to a seatbelt ticket. And they dismissed all the criminal charges.
Well, that's good.
And then I appealed it. Mark. And the ruling just came down about a month ago. I didn't know anything about the state project until just probably within the last couple of months. And make a long story short, the appeal was reversed because I wasn't given a proper colloquy during the plea hearing, and so that's all I was calling about. Is I go back to court at the end of the month on an incident that took place like almost 3 years ago.
Well, I'm glad that you've had some success. That's fantastic.
And the only question I had to you is, can they have a bite at the apple a second time?
I don't know. Well, if they haven't filed a charge, then they could, or if they dismissed it, if it's traffic, they can. After I don't know what the statute of limitations is, if on that. There probably is, because there's statute of limitations on real crimes. So it stands to reason they'd have that also for made up crimes like what they've charged you with. But you'd have to do a search and find out what that is. How many years did they have to they can file that again?
Well, one thing I want to tell you really quick is they dismiss all the criminal actions, but it was very, very bizarre how they went about it, because they did originally let me go, and I would not produce any ID, and I asked for a probable cause, the reason why I need to give you ID, and here we are weeks later, they issue out tickets, and I had to actually turn myself in, and they gave me $500 bail, and I'll get this again. This is like weeks after the incident.
Well, they don't have to. Under their rules, they don't have to file criminal charges right away.
Well, yeah, okay, but it was kind of bizarre because I never heard of anything like it before. But the one thing I wanted to tell you is they dismissed all the charges, and I pled guilty to a seatbelt ticket.
Right.
And I went on appeal just to see if all the things I've learned over the last several years, the right to travel and all that, was the commercial activity, paid for hire, and all that was basically just denied but he went back into the sentencing transcripts and reversed it based on I wasn't read my rights properly, and which was kind of amazing. That judge actually went out of his way to have the case reversed.
That is very unusual, especially if, well, you'd have to look. The only reason why they would throw it out if you were not read your rights was if you had actually given statements to the police officer and asked questions, and those statements were used against you. And it's really not something that on the criminal charges that they threw out, that is certainly applicable there. But a seatbelt charge, it's not even something that I think Miranda rights even comes into play when you're talking about a seatbelt charge. So, hey, good on that. But you do know now too. Well, congrats on it, and that's great. You do know now that don't use that right to travel stuff.
No, yes. I've been listening to you and read up, and you make a lot more sense than anybody I've ever heard, because that right to travel, paid for hire, and all that stuff. Boy, oh boy, they get all wound up because on my ticket, it said that I've intruded a sovereign citizen. It's right on the ticket.
Yeah, putting that rate on the ticket, it is, having that on the ticket, I'm almost, part of me wants to say BS that you got anything thrown out. It's amazing that they put sovereign citizen on the ticket and you had this thrown out. That's remarkable.
Well, he's an old Polish judge, comes from the old school, and he saw the corruption going on within Erie County and some of the local towns and police and villages, and he reviewed everything and what I went through, and I think he says, you know what, this guy put a lot of work into this appeal, because it was pretty. Mark, it was pretty long. It was 78 pages long, because I did a FOIA request on the police. Listen to this. I got to tell you one more thing. I did a FOIA request on the police department here locally. Do you realize that the local police in Erie County, which is in Buffalo area, do you know that most of them make over $100,000 a year? Some of them make a lot more than that, and the average income in this town is right around $43,000 or $44,000 a year. They make double, and they do absolutely nothing but harass people. And there's like no crime in this county. Buffalo's a very, very quiet, safe town.
Oh, I'm sure there are people that would go ahead and disagree with you there, but it's certainly not, Detroit or DC. I give you that, but I'm glad that it happened. It's remarkable that they can label you that explicitly and you got anywhere. So whether, I don't know what the judge is back. That's just kudos to you for that. That's fantastic. But
Mark, before I leave you, but I was going to ask you, what if you were in my position? I go back to court at the end of the month because after it was reversed and remanded, it starts from day one again. Any recommendations? Anything that you recommend that I do?
I would challenge the prosecution's claims against you. I would challenge a claim that just because you're physically in New York, that their laws apply and gives them jurisdiction, and it's also an element of the charge. It goes. Exactly. Yeah. And so just real briefly, it does go to subject matter jurisdiction, because subject matter jurisdiction is jurisdiction over a particular subject matter. They have to have a case. And it has to be a case within a particular subject matter that they've been granted. So they have jurisdiction in a legal sense over traffic cases, but they have to actually have a case. Now here, to have a case and to have an actual adjudicative, where it's adjudicative and under the and it's a I'm sorry, tough guy. An adversarial proceeding. So it's actually can be adjudicated under an adversary proceeding that there are two true adversaries. There has to be the violation of the law that they have to. That's the legal injury that they are alleging, as opposed to a tort. And they has to have, and they can't just assume that they may not assume that the law applies and that you violate. They have to have actual evidence of that. So even if you're not looking at it as far as jurisdiction, it's an element of the charge. And so they have to have evidence of that. So it's something that's sorely missing with some of the criticism. They want to lie to you, and they may say, "Sir, the law is not an element of the charge," and say, "Excuse me, am I mistaken? It's not mala prohibita. You're not actually charging me with a violation of a code." Well, yes, you have been accused of violating the code, but the code itself is not an element. Is there a crime without the code? And that to me is what clinches it, right? I mean, if you look at it, it's only a crime because of the statute, right?
Right.
So if the crime doesn't exist without the statute, does it make any sense at all to say that the statute is not actually an element of the crime?
So in conclusion, you're saying file a motion to dismiss for lack of jurisdiction. And is that what I'm getting from you?
That's what I do, yes. So we're showing that the territorial, personal, and subject matter jurisdiction doesn't exist, and there isn't sufficient evidence to set forth an actual violation because they're assuming the biggest element, and that is that it applies to you in the first place.
Right. Mark, do you sell that motion on your website at all?
I do. It's just go to markstevens.net.
All right, Mark, thanks a lot. I really appreciate your time, and I'll be looking forward to listening to more shows, but I thought that was a good thing that they had a reverse and remand it because it's very rare, especially in this county, from what I was told.
Traffic reversals, yes. I would say that no matter where you happen to be, that's extremely rare. And it's even more rare when they've labeled you a sovereign citizen. So,
yes, they made a point of it too, because I was quoting the law and all that, and they do not like that at all.
No, they don't. You only quote it when it's necessary to show a contradiction, and you never want your position to be legal interpretation. You want it always to be that the prosecution doesn't have sufficient evidence so that they can make the ridiculous argument that they don't need evidence. So, but hey, I appreciate the call, my friend, and definitely let me just keep in touch and get into the role play and the Skype chat so you can prep for court that way and get yourself in front of one of the city councils there, maybe in Cheektowaga. Even if they don't answer your question about jurisdiction, what I know you operate on the presumption that if I'm physically in Cheektowaga, that your laws apply to me and gives you jurisdiction. What proof do you have that that's true? Even if they don't answer you, it's prepping you to, for court so that you can better question when you do eventually go.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. By the way, I'm not sure I'm not sure when the last time you were here, but we get a lot of Canadian people that come here from Toronto and Ontario, and they go to the Galleria Mall, which is a very, very big mall. We get a lot of people that come down there, and every now and then you see them getting pulled over, but there's a lot of cops around here, and I think they might overdo it around here.
They overdo it in most places. So the greater the population, it's just, it's bad all over. So, but good luck, and let me know what happens.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, it's Shane up there in Cheektowaga area, Buffalo. So yeah, somebody was pretty funny. He said, "What kind of bear is best?" I actually got to see that episode. For those who didn't get the reference, which don't think could be too many people, but the Bears eat beats The Office, of course. So I got to see that the other day, and one of the funniest cold opens ever. What are you doing? That's just a great show. So you want to join me here on the big broadcast? I'm assuming we are not on commercial on the LRN stream. It's 218-632 9399 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the # or the hashtag. And I guess, it is a difficult and there is no single good answer for, how to get to a voluntary society. There's so many things that have to be taken into account. And I guess this is probably why, despite not being happy with a lot of the Free State Project, I would throw my support there, especially for people like Bill, who were moving to an early mover to New Hampshire, as far as why it's best to use non-political action to bring about a voluntary society and to do it statewide. Because if you wanted, it's this thing, I had that issue where well, why are you doing it to take over this, the state government and get control of the state government and then start dismantling it and stop putting people in jail for payment, the non-payment? Why not take over Keene? And the more you understand about it, you say, well, you really can't do that, because the system, the water supply and the water treatment and everything is at best on the county level. And I don't necessarily see where they would be giving up control of that. So you could be in Keene, but you'd still be beholden to the county. So if you're able to get control of the state government, then you can start doing away with the compulsory payment, so that you can still have the services provided, but you're not going to be putting people in jail and taking the property, or even killing them if they resist payment. So is this Free State Project the best idea? I think it's a pretty damn good one. It doesn't have to be the best idea. I know that there's some limitations that are there. And the Free State Project, for those who don't know, of course, the idea to get 20,000 liberty-minded people to New Hampshire, because the numbers are enough so that you can get liberty-minded people, anarchists, for example, into state government to start reducing the size and scope and the violence of it. And I have my disagreements with some individuals, but I still think it's a great idea. I think I'd like to know more as far as the numbers of people who are moving there. I know I've criticized some individuals because, given the opportunity that they had to help somebody who was a Free State Project, who is a Free State Project member and an early mover, and was the first one, talking about you, Bill, the first one with the Twin Mountain Country Store, first one in New Hampshire to sell gasoline for Bitcoin. So that's somebody who really, who was, just putting it into action and making a difference. And my disagreement was, what I didn't like was for people to sit by and just watch him get put out of business. That you have the opportunity, like the commercial here on LRN says, here people are actually doing something. But when it was given with some very small number of people, it was a handful, had the opportunity to help and did nothing. But you can't fault. I'm not going to generalize and say that don't participate or go to New Hampshire as an activist, or just to be in an area that's more free. I'm not going to say don't. No, I would support people for doing it. I think it's great. I think even if you're going to go and try to get elected, the only time I would say I would discourage that is I wouldn't do it at the state level. I would say if you're running at the local level, at least you have an opportunity to get in. A lot of good things about that. And of course, I am out of the running as far as moving there because all my roots are right here. All my wife's roots are right here in Arizona. But hey, I can still help promote the idea and have people and support people who are going. So but hey, nothing's going to be perfect. And trying to hold down for a perfect one, not going to work. I would like to see where something may be closer to home, but the idea behind the Free State Project doesn't work in an area like Arizona because there's just too many. That's it. There's too many people. Now, if there was an area where it was very low population in a county that didn't have too many, then that might be an idea for some of us in Arizona, that it would be where we could get enough people into a county in Arizona and take over the services in the county. So you have the sanitation and the water and whatnot. But, we have to find a place to do that. I think this idea that just start doing it on your own, I think it's, depending on where you are, it could be very foolhardy, because those who snub their nose at the government and want to do things on their own, let's say they want to do their own water, sanitation, and electricity, chances are you're going to get attacked. You're opening yourself up for an attack, and you have to be able to withstand that attack. You have to have a plan in place. What do you do when the local territorial gangsters want to stop you from doing that? But maybe there is a place in Arizona that's able to do that. And it's not a matter of that we don't have principle and don't want to, if you don't move to New Hampshire, you don't have any principle. You're just talking about it, Like we said with Tom, it's not a one size fits all. I do my thing, other people do their thing. And the object is that it's working together. We get more people who are aware of what the problem is and what the solution is. But we have a lot of ways to be able to get there. Is nonviolent non-cooperation, is not paying taxes, is that always the best tactic for everybody? Of course it's not going to be. But, it doesn't do us any good to start slinging mud and saying, well, they still pay taxes. They're not. No, I think the type of people think, well, just make as much money as humanly possible, pay as much, and eventually government will just go away. I don't think that's a very good tactic. But hey, what the hell? I just think it's wrong to complain and throw stones at someone who's not doing the same kind of activism as you think is the best type of activism. And hey, we right here on the network, Ernest Hancock, who I don't think he does it anymore, but has run for state office and telling people not to vote. Don't even vote for him. The whole point of running was to just get the word out because people won't talk to you otherwise. Oh, but man, the mainstream media will fall all over themselves if you're actually running. So anyway, the number is 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the #. And what I was mentioning before, what I was talking about before is Josh was asking about cross-examination, about proceeding in court. This is a big one. So do I have a video or something on how to handle a trial, cross-examination? I talk about court procedure and trials pretty much every single show. That's why we give out the caller number so people can join me if you've got a question there. But we'll go through some of the basics here. Because we know we got Shane in New York who's probably going to have to go to trial. We always start the defense I believe it's better to start with a motion to dismiss challenging the arguments and the claims that the prosecution's using against us. I'd be the first one to admit that the motion to dismiss is very rarely granted. It's forming the basis of your defense, though. It's kind of heads up. I'm going to challenge your sacred cows. And in what the motion to dismiss goes through, just like we were doing in a cross-examination. But in a cross-examination, we're asking leading questions. We're not just making statements, which you don't want to, you have no choice but to make statements in a motion to dismiss or a demur. But we have to lay out, and that's the way we lay out our thing. So a motion to dismiss or a demur, and again, this is what we're bringing out in a cross-examination. If it's denied, is the basis for a demur motion to dismiss. One of the bases is that the prosecution hasn't submitted sufficient evidence to set forth a valid charge or an offense. My foundation for this is, of course, like I've mentioned already, is they're charging you with violating their code, their rules. And they want to and what they do is they assume or say it's not an element of the charge, the statute itself. So I've mentioned this many times. 99% of what we're going through here on the show are mala prohibitum laws or mala prohibita. And those are laws that create a crime where none exists. It's not a crime by its nature, which is mala in se. See, murder is wrong regardless if some bureaucrat says so or not. Because we get that that's wrong. It's self-preservation, if you will. We don't want it happening to us. So to be morally consistent or just to be consistent, we don't kill other people. It's wrong. So look at real crimes or things we don't want being done to us. So if it offends you to talk about morality, or if it offends you, then look at it that way. Or you say there's no moral, or there's no objective. I don't even know what the basis of that is. Why that's such an important thing with some people. Well, there's no objective reality to that. If I punch you in the face, there's an objective reality that I'm hurting you. So, if you bomb brown people in the Middle East, it's objectively wrong. You're killing people. Do you want that done to you? It seems pretty reasonable. Do no harm. And yes, I get that some people will excuse the harm that they cause, but I can pretty much guarantee they don't want it done to them. There is no way that the way we are treated in court with these apologists want that done to them. And they'll cheerlead for a judge lying on the record about me because it's not being done to them. That doesn't mean that the moral principle is wrong. It's just you've got psychopaths who don't believe it applies to them. And so they make these claims in court that their rules apply, and you violated it. Those are elements of the charge. So it is inconceivably stupid to me for anyone to make the claim that the statute you're charged with violating is immaterial and irrelevant and not an element of the actual charge that has to be proven. Wow. That's why you say the mental gymnastics to try to justify statism when you're trying to justify government as moral. So if they deny all that, and it is on cross-examination, this is where, yes, there could be problems, Josh, and for everybody else. That's why, look, you got to do your role playing and get in front of a city council. Don't let the first time you're doing a cross-examination or asking these questions, don't let court be the first time you're doing that. You have to prepare for that. I recommend this, but very few people actually follow through. So hopefully more people will do that. I actually put it in the instructions to call the prosecutor, go to a city council meeting, ask them these questions so that you are not surprised. So cross-examination, it is, I think, grossly misunderstood or deliberately misstated what the scope of a cross-examination is when you're in court. You're allowed a lot more latitude on a cross-examination than you are in a direct examination. The direct examination is when, let's say, the prosecutor calls their witness. And they are not allowed, except in very limited circumstances, to ask leading questions because they're basically in a way of just directing the testimony, and that should be from the witness themselves. Yeah, somebody was saying witness qualifications. The big one is personal firsthand knowledge. Personal firsthand knowledge of the matters they're testifying to. Now, I know that doesn't apply to an expert witness, and I know that police officers can cross over and testify as experts, but if they're testifying about what they did to you, they have to have personal firsthand knowledge. If they're testifying that they saw you and that they determine the laws apply to you and that you violated those laws, well, they have to have personal firsthand knowledge of that, of those matters. Rule 602 is the federal rule. Arizona adopted it. It's 702 in California. And, you'd have to just look it up. Almost pretty much every jurisdiction has that, every court system. That's what makes them a witness, that they actually saw or heard what they're testifying to. So if the police officer is testifying that he saw you violate the law, he saw that the laws apply to you and you violated them, he's got to have personal knowledge of this. It is now, that doesn't mean that the judge is going to, and the prosecutor are going to agree with that. here's a thing. You're going to find out when you go to court. This is a phenomenon that's typically just in court when you're being attacked. Because when you ask them these questions at a city council meeting, or you ask a tax agent these things, you don't usually hear this crap. But they'll turn around and they'll say that the police officer can't testify to those things. They'll actually lie, saying that if you ask him for the facts his claim was based on, that calls for a legal conclusion. And that's just, I've mentioned this on this show, I don't know how many times before. That is not true. But they'll let him get away with it. Because the rules do, in fairness, you're going to find that when you get to court, the rules only apply if it helps the prosecutor. You're going to find that out. Because they'll allow the police officer to go on the stand and testify to legal claims that he made. He'll get on direct examination and he'll testify, he broke the law. I saw him break the law. But when you ask him questions, you can object to that. Objection calls for a legal conclusion, and they'll overrule it. Why? Because he's just restating his testimony. He's just restating what happened at the stop. But when you ask him a question about the facts his claim on direct examination was based on, they'll make the same objection as you, and the judge will sustain it. The exact same objection. Why do they do that? Because it is a criminal organization. Like I mentioned with IM in Alaska, they force strangers to give them money. All of this is just for show. None of the rules actually apply if they get in the way of a conviction. Now, not every time. We still win more than we lose. But it happens enough times, and you have to be aware of that. You have to expect that that's going to happen so that you can make an objection, ask a good leading question to bring out how unfair that is. Now, they'll go and here's another example of the rules just not applying. In not one instance, when they put a police officer on a stand, have they ever sustained an objection that the witness had lacked personal firsthand knowledge and, according to the rules, was not permitted to testify. Not once have they sustained that objection. They've always overruled it. And sometimes they give the explanation, well, if you believe he lacks personal knowledge, you can bring it on cross-examination. Now, does anyone think for a second? And I've done this. I've tested this. So if the rule is they have to have personal firsthand knowledge, but that can be overlooked because of cross-examination, then we can just call anybody out of the audience to testify as a rebuttal. And the fact that they lack personal knowledge and aren't qualified to testify, that's something you could bring up on cross-examination. Do you think a judge in traffic court or a drug prosecution or an IRS case, do you think that they're going to allow you or I to put an unqualified witness on the stand? No. But they let the cop on the stand. They let the damn IRS agent on the stand. Why? Because the rule doesn't apply to the prosecutor when it helps the prosecutor. So no going into this. We can talk about denial of cross-examination without waiver would be a constitutional error of the first magnitude, and no amount of showing a want of prejudice would cure it. Brookhart versus Janus, as well as so many other cases about denial of cross-examination without waiver, is a huge reversible error. It ultimately doesn't matter when the judges half the time don't apply the rules. The rules just don't matter. So anyway, I've been going for a few hours here. I'm going to actually take a top of the hour break. So we will move into the third of 3 hours of Anarchy Radio right here on the No State Project on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network, and take your calls on the other side. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Yes, welcome to the third of 3 hours of Anarchy Radio right here on the Liberty Radio Network. Anarchy meaning an absence of rulers, not an absence of rules. Basically, a society where the rules apply to everybody. Do no harm applies to everybody. That just using force, overwhelming force to subject other people to your rule does not make you legitimate, doesn't give you jurisdiction, and it certainly doesn't make you honorable. It makes you a criminal. And of course, criminals are going to turn around and they're going to legalize all their crimes. So, of course, they're going to do that. Why wouldn't they? One of the first things they have to do is go ahead and legalize all their criminal actions like taxation and false imprisonment, kidnapping, slavery. Yeah. Oh, yes, that's right. That's another point about American law. I don't think this has ever been overturned. That people 100-something years ago challenged conscription, the forced military, challenged that on grounds that it was morally wrong and it was slavery. And they turned around and the court said, well, 16th Amendment only abolished African slavery. It only abolished what we a certain type of slavery that we considered immoral. After 2,000 years, we finally agree. Okay, well, yeah, seeing other people as property and forcing them to do your bidding. Well, that's morally reprehensible. But forcing everybody, regardless of their skin color, of building roads, that's not slavery. Why? Because the honorable among society, the lawyers, said it wasn't. Why wasn't it considered slavery? Oh, that's right. Oh, because the Romans did it. And since the military was historically not considered slavery, that wasn't included. We're not going to call that slavery. And all they did was an appeal to what? Tradition. Well, the roads have traditionally not been considered slavery, and the military traditionally not considered. So we're just going to appeal to tradition, not to any basic principle of right and wrong. So anyhow, you want to join me on the big show, it's 218-632-9399. 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020. And yes, an act of violent conquest, always wrong. You can justify it however you want. That's might makes right. So I can't believe you still have to argue about that. We'll go to, we had a Skype call here. Skype call, you're welcome to the big show. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh, hold on. I got you. I'm sorry. What was your name? Where are you calling from?
Yeah. Chris from Kansas.
Oh, you're calling from well, welcome back.
How you doing? So I got a question. I did send you a message over Skype, but I had a more general question, and that is when you're helping people deal with IRS issues, what has been your experience if someone gets a summons from a revenue officer, but the person who the IRS is making claims against doesn't want things to escalate? What's been your experience in having some kind of a resolution so that, things don't end up in tax court and things don't end up to where, they're thrown in a cage just because they owe money, or at least that's the claim. You know what I mean? I'm just curious about, how people have resolved these issues that you've worked with over the years.
Well, when it comes to a summons, very few of them have resolved in our favor. Most of the time, if they file in court against you, you're going to lose. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you have. It doesn't matter if the agent admits that they have no evidence and they're not qualified. They'll just lie and ignore that. If it goes to court, you're going to lose. I'd fight it, but you have to know federal court with the IRS, one, it wouldn't go to the tax court. This will go to the district. They'll file against you in the district court. That judge is going to do whatever the IRS asks him to do. That's the way it works. You can even have the judge, if, I had a situation with Stephen Sharp. The judge, well, I forget the judge's name. It was the Wyoming case. The judge said the witness was not competent to make the determinations he made. He wouldn't strike the testimony, though. He would not. He just wouldn't do it. Instead, he went on a rant screaming about deporting Mark, who was born and raised and lived his whole life in Wyoming. See, that's something they don't tell you, Chris. When they mentioned the Edwards case, the judge was actually screaming about deporting a man who was born and raised in Wyoming. And
wow.
Yeah. See, all that's missing. So if you want to just pigpile on me, that's what they do. They never mention Mark never paid a dime of the to the IRS, or the fact that Gary Murphy was the one that wrote the letter that no one should speak to me because I have over 24 very embarrassing calls to the about the agency on my website. But yes, the judge in that case in district court in Casper, Wyoming, was screaming like a spoiled child. And Mark is standing, we're all like bewildered, like that. Even he said, "Where would you deport me to? I was born and raised right here in Wyoming." These judges sometimes are just black robe. All right, I'm not going to get into that. Chances, I would make the record the best I can and hope that you don't have a sadist who is the IRS agent, because if you've got a sadist, it's not going to end well at all. If he's somebody who takes pleasure in breaking people and getting you to comply, he will say whatever is necessary and lie through his teeth. The judge will allow it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you can say, but I have a right to cross-examine. No, you don't. They will lie, and they will not allow you to. In fact, I know someone, what happened was he demanded cross-examination at the first order to show cause hearing, because that's what they'll do to you, Chris. They'll hit you with an order to show cause. They will force you to be there to show cause. You will request that the agent get on the stand so that you can cross-examine him based on that false affidavit he filed, and you won't be allowed to do it. Then, if there's another hearing or it gets on appeal, they will actually lie and say that you waived your right to confrontation. Did I scare Chris off?
No.
Okay.
I'm just
you're in for
take this all in.
You're in for a battle. I'm telling you, I don't give a damn what anybody says to you. I have documented proof, and I've gone through this a number of times. I hope that doesn't happen to you, but it did happen in Minnesota, and it did happen in California, and I reported it on the show. They flat out lied about cross-examination.
Yeah.
So you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of curious, where, I mean, I don't think anybody is willingly wanting to be put in a cage, right? So, and I mean, if it really comes down to it, yeah, I hear the music coming on, man. Let's take this to the next segment.
Well, what I'm going to, yeah. All right. So just hold tight. I'll mute you up. My name's Mark Stevens. You're listening to the No State Project here on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network, and streaming live on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching on YouTube, we got about 3 minutes, and we will be right back. So don't go anywhere. Well, the number is 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020. Yes, welcome back to the No State Project. We're going to do our best to get to everybody here today. So I'm not going to give out the caller number because we are jammed up. So I want to bring back Chris in Kansas. So what were you saying before the break?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Awesome. So, yeah, I was just kind of wondering, what your experience was working with other people, and has anyone you ever worked with, like, been able to set up a payment plan? I mean, I'm just curious, man. Like,
Sure. Yeah, and but you're calling about. But I just wanted to make it clear just how bad the situation is when the IRS issues a summons. You have very little chance to have a good resolution with that. Chances are they're gonna put your back up against the wall, and they will tell you, if you do not give us XYZ, you're going to jail until you do. You're dealing with criminals, and that's the way, unfortunately, a lot of the stuff with the summons goes down. So,
yeah.
But as far as making a payment, yeah, if you do that, yeah, but there's strings that come with that. If you make a deal with them, they're probably going to want you to sign something that you're going to file every year and probably have to submit to an audit every single year for 5 or 10 years. They're not going to make it easy for you. And bottom line, everything has to do with the IRS agent believing you. And if the IRS agent doesn't believe you, there's no judge is going to disagree with them, at least initially. You will do some serious time because you're not going to be able to convince a judge that you're telling the truth. You can, so if the summons says you have to have XYZ and you've given him XYZ and the agent doesn't believe you, the judge couldn't care less what your testimony is. They just don't care. So that's so just keep that in mind, everybody. If the IRS sends a summons, chances are you're going to lose. And it's not because you're an anarchist, or it's because the system is so dishonest. But anyway,
yeah.
So another question?
I think I got the gist of kind of what's happened with other people. So thanks for taking my call, man.
Hey, I appreciate the call, and we'll be more off air, but yeah, definitely get at least a witness there so you can get a record of what's going to happen. So you can have a witness since you're not able to, they're not going to let you record. But definitely bring a witness with you.
Yeah. All right, man.
All right, take it easy. Chris in Kansas. We've always been on the show before. It's been a while. I'm really hoping. Kerry from New Mexico, welcome back to the show. Do you have some good news for me?
Oh, no, not at all.
Kerry.
It's pretty much the same, except for I'm running out of time we filed the writ to prohibit the judge from hearing the case, and then I will have court on Tuesday, and of course I'll have to go in and file that. I finally got the paperwork back, and I can file it on Monday. Is there any way that that I can stop the judge from hearing the case on Monday, or?
Only if you have a stay of proceedings from the higher court, or he agrees to stay it.
There's nothing I can file that would get me that.
Well, I already told you before, and you have to file with the petition for a writ of mandamus, for example, or a writ of prohibition, whatever it is. You have to file a stay of proceedings, or have it in there that you're requesting a stay, so that the trial court can't proceed and moot the petition. Because if they proceed anyway, it moots the petition. There's no reason for the petition.
Right, but I finally got it. Okay, I have been to court like 3 different times, and every time that I get into court, they reject my writ of petition to the fact that what they say is, oh, no, you didn't file it correctly. So from this thing, so finally, it all takes time. So on my last filing, I believe that it's incorrectly, and of course, I will get it filed in the district court by tomorrow or by Monday, and then of course, like I said, the court case will come up on Tuesday.
Yeah, unless you get an emergency motion to stay, or he agrees to it, he's not going to stop. I mean, some judges we've seen where we do file the petition for the writ, and out of professional courtesy, just to be a nice guy, they've stopped on their own. And well, no, we're not. We're going to wait until hear what the appellate court has to say. But that's not something you can count on. Unless it's in writing, he's not going to stop.
Yeah, well, none of this was about them being nice people. I mean, that was the furthest thing from their mind. I mean, obviously, they kept pushing forward.
Yeah, I get it.
On the bright side of things, they gave up on two of their issues where they kept trying to ruin my life through zoning issues. Claiming this, that, and the other, claiming I had commercial vehicles parked in a residential or agricultural zone or whatever. But I mean, obviously, in the one case, they brought it 10 years out of the past, and it was only basically to get at my finances. They just, they penalized me X amount of money, and then once they filed a charge against me, then if I didn't pay it, then I would be in contempt of court or whatever, and then I couldn't get out. So I went in ahead and paid them, and of course afterwards, then they just close the case, So that's one of the things I'd like to do is to file something on that particular one where I can go back in there and try to open it so that I could get my money back. And basically, if they can come after me 10 years after the fact, I should be able to try to get.
Well, yeah, but Kerry, we've talked about this a number of times, right? They're coming back after 10 years on a judgment. Okay. And it's not like they charge you 10 years ago and then they want to prosecute you now. That's why they're doing that. They're just going to collect on a judgment they already have. And to them, judgments are permanent.
They're coming after me. It's not even after a judgment. They're just wanting me to pay court fees. That's all they're really coming after.
Isn't that because of the judgment 10 years ago?
No, that had nothing to do with the judgment. That was just, they just wanted to collect extra money. They felt that they were owed money. They felt that they could profit.
Jeez. All right. Well, I appreciate the call, Kerry. Let me know what happens on Tuesday. We're up against the break. My name is Mark Stevens. You're listening to the No State Project here on LRN.FM, the Liberty Radio Network. If you want to join me, it's 218-632-9399, 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020. We'll be back in just a moment. Yes, welcome back to the No State Project here on LRN.FM and streaming live on my YouTube channel, No State Project. And he's been on the big show before. Let's welcome back the ICBM catcher. Welcome back.
Good evening.
What do you got for us today?
Well, I'm looking at a couple notes I made from our last conversation. I'm still wondering about the lack of evidence for your little rule there about do no harm. All you gave us in our last conversation was evidence that animals have empathy. You also, one time, I'm also noticing my notes, I was telling you, informing you that you don't need a passport to leave the country. You insisted that you do. So I'm pointing out some inconsistencies, going over my notes. I'd also like to find out what the world looks like in anarchy land. Are we not going to have a government anymore? Is there no government, or is it just a different type of government? Tell us a little bit more about that.
What do you want me to address first? You raised at least 3 issues there.
Well, let's just you ought to briefly get out of the way that the 2 inconsistencies and lack of response on the 2 things I mentioned first. Once again, where is the evidence of the edict, law, whatever you want to call it, of do no harm? Where's the evidence for that?
I never said, I've actually addressed this before. I said that I don't have evidence. What I do have is that I am justified. If you try to harm me, I'm justified in stopping you. I've already addressed this. I've already answered you. I'm telling you, there's no actual evidence, sir. I've freely admitted that several times.
Okay. All right. So then the only reason I bring that up and pressed you for an answer, because you would say that is, I don't know how you put it, but you say that we should all live by that law, do no harm. Well, there's no evidence of that, so why should I? And that goes back to your ridiculous claim of there being no evidence for any law applying to anyone, so why should we obey it? That just gives you the contrast, and once again goes to the continual hammering that I've done to your philosophy. So move on to the next thing. When you
okay, you do realize, well, there's a difference between a moral principle of do no harm and a politically or a rule that's created that would compel you to do something when you aren't harming anybody. You think that's the same thing. So I'm puzzled as to why you think that those are exactly the same thing. One requires you to just live your life and leave me alone, and there's a natural justification if you do try to harm me. Another one is where you're actually taking control over somebody's life, and you think that those are the same things.
They're not direct correlations, but it's more of a principle. It's more of a principle to point out. Once again, my position is that your entire philosophy and your whole no state philosophy is nonsense. I believe it's an act, and I'm just staying consistent with that to continually hammer this into dust so that you can no longer practice your hobby for money anyway. I don't mind if you do it as a hobby, but as long as you're collecting money for it and duping people into paying you, I'm going to do everything I can to put you out of business.
How am I duping people? Give me an example of something where I'm saying something that is inaccurate in order to get money.
Your whole cottage industry there of giving people the impression that you can help them evade taxes is just, it's absurd. And unfortunately you get some maybe desperate people or people that have, they're up against it with the IRS because they didn't pay their taxes or whatever it is. And you give them this little glimmer of hope that maybe maybe they don't have to pay this money they owe. When you and I and we all know that in the end, if you owe it, you owe it, and you're going to pay it.
Okay, if you owe it. Now, did you hear me give a glimmer of hope or any kind of false hope to Chris in Kansas regarding the IRS summons? Did you hear what I said to him about that?
Yes, I did.
Did I give him hope, or did I say he's basically up against the wall and is going to lose?
Right. In that case, that's what you said. But your general, I mean, look, that's what your business is about. Your business, you could get as exasperated as you want, but your business is about telling people that you can help them get out of paying taxes. Among other things.
Do I have documentary proof from state and federal tax agencies proving that we've gotten tax assessments tossed out?
I'm sure you do, but I don't know that it's.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I do. Okay.
I've looked on your site there, and the one thing that I just cannot seem to find is the judge's finding explaining why he or she found in a particular way. All you usually see, now I haven't read every document, but I've gone over it, just scouring it, trying to find something. I see cases dismissed. I see things thrown out. I see, people, I guess, whatever happens. But that happens all the time. All the time. Cases are dismissed.
Wait, we're talking about the IRS. Wait. We're talking about the IRS. Yep. Stay on point here, okay?
IRS, that's what I'm talking about.
No, wait, no. Most of the ones that are thrown out with the IRS have never entered court. So the tax stuff is almost always because we've avoided court. I always say to people, I've said from day one, if it goes to court, your chances of success are practically zero. So, but you're saying that I'm giving false hope. I have many, many examples on the website, and one I bring up is a great one because it's explicit. It's what every critic says I don't have. Well, not every. And the 6 years that the IRS tossed out, 6 years worth. And I give all the supporting documents. And the last one from the IRS said, based on the information you provided, we have determined that there's no obligation to file a return. Now they had financial information. And I've also had Franchise Tax Board throw things out. I've had many tax agencies throw things out. So you do agree, or you can go and verify very easily on my website that what I'm saying is true. I have had the documents posted there for years. So if I have shown success with tax agencies, including the IRS, tell me again how I'm giving people false hope that they can have tax assessments thrown out.
There's a subtle thing that you are overlooking here. In a particular case, the IRS or the whatever it is in Canada, they may be simply incorrect. It may be an erroneous assessment. Absolutely. But you and your overall offering, let's say you have your little business there and you offer people this service, and that offering is that you, through your magic incantations, can somehow get people out of paying taxes. In a given case, the IRS may be incorrect, in which case whatever happens, they dismiss it or throw it out, or they don't prosecute it, whatever happens. But then it brings up the other question: if they're a bunch of thieves and crooks, they're not
what?
Oh, they're not thieves and crooks when they find in your favor?
I didn't say that. I said that thieves and crooks, they want to make up that some of them have some shame. I've said this 1,000 times, that to make it look good, they don't have the evidence, they let it go. And magic incantation. So I make no secret as to how I do things here on the show. You have to agree, if you're acting in good faith here, that I'm asking, and I have not only do I have the documents on, and I'm blowing through the commercial, by the way. I want to spend as much, I wanted to spend more time with you on the show and address these issues.
Mm-hmm.
I have the documentation on my website, and I have call a shames where I'm talking directly to tax agents. So there's no mystery as to what I'm saying and writing to these tax agents. And that is the evidence they have to support their claim that the laws apply because I'm physically in Arizona. Now, is asking for evidence a magic incantation?
Your approach is a you use these magical words, just like you call the law magical words. The evidence, the system does not need to present evidence that satisfies you. Evidence, the rules for evidence have already been established.
You're not answering the question, though.
What's that?
All right. If I'm asking somebody, if they make a claim the laws apply because I'm physically in Arizona, and my question is, what facts do you rely on to prove that that's true? What part of that is is magical incantation? What part of that is magical? What words?
This is your stock phrase you keep going back to. That's not the specific part of your nonsensical argument that I'm calling issue with here. What I'm saying is, you ask for this evidence. You think, well, you know what? In a way, that you think that's some kind of magic force field that no one can penetrate. Show me the evidence. There is no evidence that satisfies your particular whatever it is you want to see, because it doesn't work that way. That's not how the law works. There is no evidence. But then when you follow that, when you extrapolate that to its natural conclusion, then, like I've said before, no laws apply to anyone anywhere because there's no evidence of any law applying to anyone.
So then how is it magic? How is it a magical incantation for me to just ask them and call their bluff? How is that magical?
Well, okay, A, you're not calling their bluff. See, when you in these calls of shame, and I've heard you haranguing these people, all you do is incessantly argue and I object, objection this, objection that. All you do is just keep haranguing people in these judges and prosecutors. I mean, you're just like a gnat flying around someone's head. All you're doing is you think that you're going to get them to all of a sudden go, oh, geez, Stevens, you're right. We have to do that because you say so.
Well, it's not because I say so, but the basic principles of logic and even their own rules say so. Maybe you're not as aware of the rules, but they're supposed to, due process and fairness requires that their determinations are not arbitrary and speculative or speculation. So, if it's the natural result, I think what you mean to, it's fair to say that when you say it's the natural result, that it's the logical result, then it's not necessarily magical. And the idea that I'm holding them to a burden of proof that they proclaim is theirs, that's not magical. And I don't claim that everything can be tossed out, that I say that this has been an effective, and you're going to deny, well, I guess you could, but I do say this has been proven to be effective for almost 20 years on 3 continents. And I have the documented proof of tax cases getting thrown out. I don't see where anything is magical at all. I think what you're doing is you're just using that as an insult because you don't like what I'm doing. And I'm fine with you not liking what I do. I don't care. I mean, I'm happy to have you on the show and hash this out with you. But I think honest people would agree with me that you're just using those phrases to be insulting, not adding to your actual argument, though, because your argument's wrong.
No, actually, I'm not. I don't even want to mention your connection or your similarity to sovereign citizens because you'll hang up on me. But there's a lot of very similar things, and all that stuff is the same vein of nonsense. It's like these flat Earth folks. It's just plain nonsense, but it is presented in a way that it's really just your view of a system you're very familiar with. In a way, what you're doing is just playing dumb. you're pretending not to understand. So it's like I said, the logical fallacy of equivocation. That's your main tactic right there, is equivocation, which you've never addressed either. But that's your game. And now I've said this before, but it was, I think, in my first call. I have enormous respect for you as an actor. I have never heard you once break character, except that one video, which I posted all over your videos. When you're speaking to someone, looks like it was in a hotel meeting room or something, you mentioned that all you do is make your assertions in the form of a question.
Okay.
So
how is that breaking? You do understand that you know, it's a linguistic tactic, if you will. It's how you frame things in a cross-examination, or when you're trying to be more effective in how you speak. It's more effective to ask a question than to make an assertion, because the burden of proof is on you if you make an assertion. If I ask a leading question, I keep the burden where it belongs. All I'm doing is relying on the basic principles of logic and taking advantage of the path of least resistance to make my case. That's not underhanded. That's not me breaking character. All I did was explain the tactic and why it's effective. And for anyone who's ever gone to court, who's ever done any kind of debating, who's ever done a cross-examination, to say that it's not effective to ask a leading question and instead to just make statements, no, look, I beyond, come on. You can't fault me for asking leading questions as an effective way of discussing.
That's not my point. That's not the point. That's not the point. The point is that by you saying, I don't know the exact wording, but it's all over every video you'll ever post. I think it was something along the lines of, you just make your assertions in the form of questions. Okay. So simply by saying that, you just acknowledge that you are, in fact, making assertions. They're just disguised as questions.
Do you understand? So that is how, look.
No, wait a minute. No, don't blow past that.
I'm not. I want to discuss that. I'm not blowing past. I'm trying to explain something. Do you understand? I just explained to you. It's like you're not listening to me. There is an effect.
You avoided it. You avoided it because
let me finish. Let me finish. I don't want to use the mute button. I just explained to you. There's a way you go about doing things in a conversation, just like you would do in a trial. It's more effective to ask the question and keep the burden of proof on somebody than to just make the assertion. See, an example would be, maybe this is something let's say a defense lawyer has his argument. He believes the defendant's not the guilty one. His argument is it was the butler. So he puts the butler on the stand, and he doesn't just make statements to bring out, he has to ask questions to get the testimony and to keep it on the witness to then make his argument. So to support
Okay. I understand this. All I'm pointing out is the simple fact that it is still an assertion in the form of a question. And that is pretty much an exact quote of what you said. So all I'm saying is, in fact, an assertion by any other name is still an assertion. So anyway, that's just, all I'm really doing when I call in, I just want to be a counter to all these groupies of yours that agree with everything you say and think you're wonderful. I just want to.
Why do you have to? But why be insulting and generalize against the audience? People do disagree with me, and they disagree with me all the time. There are people who they can't stomach certain things that I talk about. They actually turn it off. There are some people that won't come back and listen to the show because I say it's on a moral foundation. So they're nihilist and they never go. So no, the people don't agree with everything I have to say, and it is kind of condescending and arrogant of you. It's insulting to go, look, if you want to insult me, go ahead. You don't have to insult the audience. Come on, show some professionalism here. I'm giving you that courtesy. I haven't insulted you. So don't.
I said groupies. I didn't say your entire audience was, but you have. There are certain people.
But
your disciples that just think you're. Hey, I'm just,
you're not adding anything to the conversation, okay? You're not showing where it's wrong. And if somebody else is making an assertion that the laws do apply, there's nothing, even though I think that's complete BS, and there's even you agree there's no evidence they apply. It's not dishonest of me or some kind of magical incantation for me to then, to support my assertion, to ask questions of the
so
witness.
It is an assertion.
My assertion is that there's no evidence based on my experience with these people. So I will ask them questions. So if they're making a claim or an assertion that the laws do apply to me, I'm going to ask them questions to hold them to their burden of proof, because he who makes the claim bears the burden of proof. That's all I'm doing.
Right. I understand all that. But, we're I don't want to rehash this again and again. Obviously, you're never going to agree. You're never going to admit it. But
there's nothing to admit, though, tough guy. I'm
Okay.
telling you what I'm doing, and it's not underhanded, and it's not dishonest, and I'm not misleading anybody.
Never used either of those words.
Then what's the point?
I didn't say.
Okay.
I didn't say under.
Okay.
I'm
What is the
continuing
point
to
then?
reinforce the fact that you are an actor. This is your act, and you get paid for your act. And I want to make people, and you're a fair-minded person, because you're letting this go out over the airwaves, and it's eventually going to start to erode your business.
Okay.
But
maybe
people should not be paying you for this. It's an interesting exercise. It's a wonderful, thought-provoking approach, but it's still nonsense at the end, because of the simple fact that you're well aware of the laws that exist, and you're well aware that law is nothing but a concept. It's an idea, and one cannot have evidence of a concept or an idea but to write it down.
Yeah, but when you write it down and say it applies to people, that's different. You're taking it out of you're not acting as if it's abstract. That's why I say in the book, it's reification. They're acting as if something is real. It's a fallacy of the misplaced concreteness, however you want to phrase it.
No one's arguing.
But
no one's arguing.
Do you? All right, we're almost out of time. So just bear with me. Do you think that I'm saying things that I don't believe in just to get money?
Yes.
Wow.
I think that you are a very, very gifted actor.
I got to tell you, I've been accused of a lot of things, and if you think I'm a gifted actor, I can do impressions, and I can fake it. I'm not an actor, and do you realize that? Maybe you don't. Do you realize I did this way years before I started doing a radio show? I was doing this much. Yeah. So you think I was acting even back then?
Well, in a way, people do a lot of things to get attention. And a lot of times, I'm not being facetious when I use the flat Earth people analogy. They know that that's ridiculous. They know it's nonsense, but they love the attention. They love to create that controversy. They love the attention, even if it's ridicule.
I got to let you go. I'm completely out of time, but I do appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye. We're out of time here, and so we've got to. I've got to go. To compare me to the flat Earth when I am actually going based on the evidence, and he actually agrees with me that there's no evidence the laws apply. All I'm doing is calling out the people who believe it does. They're insisting that the laws do apply. So unlike the flat earthers, I've put them on the spot and had them admit that there's no evidence. And the flat earthers are going contrary to the evidence. So really apples and oranges there, but nice try. Anyway, I'll be live on the next on the Wednesday show. I guess it's episode 68. And but I appreciate everyone tuning in today. But till next time, salud.